Bud, what's going on?
What's going on? Week one finally here.
Welcome
Finally
back.
here.
Welcome
Thank God.
back. There's no Crying in Fantasy podcast. We are back. This is the start of week one. This is episode 4. We got a lot to talk about today, bud.
I'm so happy. Week one finally here. Draft
First
season's
things
pretty
first. Things
much
first.
over.
First
Huh?
things first. So we're both in the best of the best fantasy league.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. And if you're not familiar with the league, you can go over to IG. You can look at the page that we have up for Best of the Best. It is at BOTB Fantasy League, and you can see everything that is going on in Best of the Best. And what we've decided to do is we've decided to add a 13th man today. We've put up the interviews, and there's a lot of chatter that's going in about these interviews. So we're having a vote on 3 people to see who we're going to add as the 13th man. This is going to be interesting. You got anything to say on this?
Overall, everyone's interview was pretty good. I think everyone has a long history of fantasy. Everyone has won chips, allegedly, or however you want to put it. And at the end of the day, I think is about everyone has a good pedigree. So with the questions, they were all pretty good questions. I submitted a couple questions that you and Reef asked, so I know some of the questions were tough, and everyone gave their their honest answer. Everyone did well. So at the end of the day, it's about how you separate yourself. How did you separate yourself from the other candidates? Because it's like any other interview. We if you're going in for a job interview, everybody got a college degree. How are you going to separate yourself from the other people that have college degrees? What are you going to do to make yourself stand out? So
let's just tell everybody, go over to the page at BOTB Fantasy League. Check out the interviews. Shout out to AJ from the 3-Man Weave. He's on there. Shout out to the 3-Man Weave Fantasy League. They're all on there. And we'll give you an update next week on where we stand with that. And you can read up on the rules of the 13th man. This is a new format that we've come up with. So we're looking forward to this and seeing how it goes. So let's get into week one, and let's talk about the matchups for week one. So there's a lot going on. Tell me what matchup you are targeting for fantasy in week one.
The very easy one to go with is Thursday night. You got a lot of fantasy guys there. But I don't, you have Zeke, Dak, the 3 receivers on the Cowboys. You have Gallup, you have Cooper, you have CD. You have a lot there. Also on the other side on the other side on Tampa, you have Brady, constant fantasy guy. You don't you have AB, you have Godwin, you have Evans, but you also have that little competition going on with Rojo and Leonard Fournette. So that's a very obvious one. So I didn't really want to get too much into that. That's the very easy pick. So I think for me, something I'm really looking forward to seeing is the Bears-Rams. That has a lot of fantasy value in it, and a lot of things that we've been, a lot of preseason chatter going on. I want to see. There's a lot of talk about Darnell Mooney. There's been a lot of talk. He was climbing up the draft boards.
Fantasy sleeper.
He's everyone's favorite fantasy sleeper. So let's see if he's going to really pan out this year. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Is the Bears going to have a special package for Fields, the way that we saw the 49ers kind of unveil during the preseason? Are we going to get to see Fields week one? Because we know Dalton started. The talk of you don't think we're going to see Fields?
You won't see Fields week one. But let me tell you what my matchup is. And this one's kind of going under the radar because people are kind of like down on both teams. It's Houston and Jacksonville. Because I think you have 2 terrible defenses, which leads to a lot of fantasy output. And you have some guys that can produce. I think you're going to see what Trevor Lawrence is made of in this matchup. I know everybody's down on Tyrod Taylor, but I think going up against Jacksonville's defense, you're going to see Cooks put up some numbers. I think you can see the running game kind of get going, depending on who is going to be the running back for Houston.
You make a good point. I didn't even think of that game because there's so many players in fantasy that are staples. Houston and Jacksonville have a lot of players that we don't know where they fall yet.
Right.
It's all about, preseason chatter. We don't know how they're going to be used, how Urban Meyer's going to coach. We don't know any of this. So they have that three-headed backfield in Houston. Everybody, you have Lindsey on some teams. You have David Johnson. You have Mark Ingram everywhere.
Yeah.
So one of those guys is going to emerge, and whoever lucks out and had that player on their team is going to be happy, happy that day.
But not just that. You have DJ Shark, you have Marvin Jones, you have James Robinson, all who could be productive in this game in week 1. And you can see Trevor Lawrence have a pretty good game in this matchup. And then also, who's going to be the second receiver for Houston? Is it going to be Nico Collins? Is it going to be Chris Conley? Who's it going to be? So I'm looking at this game as kind of like a sleeper for fantasy output just because the defenses are so bad. And we'll see how that goes.
And also not just a sleeper for fantasy output, I think one of the biggest waiver ads next week is going to come from one of those.
I think so too. I think going to see whoever that second.
I'm not predicting who. I'm just saying whoever the second receiver is might end up, you might get 4 or 5 balls for 60, 70 yards, put up double digits in PPR, may fall in the end zone, and then they're going to be a big waiver ad coming up.
Yep. And
so
also,
I agree with that. That's a good pick.
Also, if you have one of the running backs that's on your waiver wire, I think you'll see a lot of people rush to pick up whoever that biggest fantasy producer is out of the Houston backfield for that game. All right, so let's keep it moving. Zach Martin winds up testing positive for COVID right before Thursday's game. He's going to miss Thursday's game. What is the impact for Dallas for this?
There's actually been some chatter that he might not actually miss the game. I'm not sure if you heard about that. I think Mike McCarthy has talked about he might be able to be available because I think if you're vaccinated, as long you don't have to wait that 10-day period.
He has to test twice. He has to test negative twice.
Yes, he has to test negative twice. Chances are he's not playing. Like you're right about that. But they're holding out a little bit of hope. But in terms of fantasy wise, I think that it's not going to have that big of an impact. I think in a real game, for the real actual game, it's going to have a bigger impact than fantasy wise because I still think that Zeke is still going to get his. I actually have Zeke projected this week for 70 yards on the ground, 3 catches for 25 yards, and falling into the end zone. So if that's the case, that's going to be like 18 fantasy points. And Dak, in terms of his fantasy value, I had him for 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 25 rushing yards. So that gives him about 20 to 25 points, this week. So fantasy-wise, I say continue starting Zeke. You're not going to bench your first-round pick, and in most cases, you drafted Dak to be your starting quarterback, and I don't think this is going to downgrade them that much in a fantasy perspective. But real life, you might see a little bit more trouble.
So here's my impact. I think you're actually going to see a bump in targets for Zeke because they're exposing the offensive line. So I think Dak is going to be looking to get the ball out of his hands pretty fast. I think it's going to have a big impact on players like CeeDee Lamb. You're not going to see as many targets down the field from Dak, but I think it's going to impact Zeke on the ground game. But in the passing game, I think he's going to be a little bit more effective. So Zeke is one of those players that's kind of like a wash when it comes to rushing and passing because he can be impactful on offense in so many different ways. But I think it's going to have an impact on Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup as far as the targets. I think you're going to see a lot of short intermediate throws. You might even see Blake Jarwin get more involved from the passing game. It just takes away that time that Dak has to get the ball out of his hands. And I think that's the biggest impact because you got a rookie that's coming in that's going to be playing on the offensive line now, 3rd round rookie. And that's going to have they're going to be targeting him on defense. I think this gives the Bucs defense a bump.
And the Bucs also have a top 3 defensive line.
Right.
But you said that Zeke might get a little bit more catches out the backfield, but they also might have Zeke staying in to block a little bit more as well because they know that they're short Zach Martin. So he might. Yeah. It works both ways. If they plan to stretch the field out and throw a deep ball, that's going to be a play that Zeke is going to stay in on, and chip off a lineman or something like that. So I think fantasy wise, I think it's good. you still start all your Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree. But let's talk about this from the Tampa Bay side. Not just the defense, but the offense. I think Tampa Bay is going to get a whole lot more possessions because you may have some 3-and-outs or some shorter possessions for Dallas where you could get an impact or a bump in the running game for Tampa Bay if they get up early for Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones. So I say if you have them on your bench, you might want to think about playing them in this game because I think they're going to get a whole lot more possessions in this game than they probably would have gotten before if Zach Martin was in. I know Zach Martin is just one player, but it's a big impact to that offensive line.
You stealing a little thunder for later on in the show with the
my fault. My fault. All right, well let's keep it going. But yeah, I think you start all your Dallas players. You start you start your Bucs defense, of course. But it upgrades Zeke in the passing game. CEH and Barkley, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Barkley are ready to go for week 1. These are big, impactful stars who were drafted in the first, second, maybe third round, depending on what drafts you were in. CEH is coming off the ankle sprain. Barkley, of course, is coming back from the ACL tear. CEH was kind of questionable going into week 1. We didn't know where Barkley was going to land. We all thought he was going to play, but is he going to be, on a pitch count? Like what's going on? So how do you approach these players? Do you start them week 1? Do you sit them? Like what's your thought?
I'm a firm believer of play your studs, especially week 1. You spent that draft capital on them. You knew what the risks were. In most cases, CEH injury and Barkley injury happened. Barkley's injury was last year, so you knew what you were doing when you drafted him and the risk that you were taking. But also in the preseason and during training camp, coaches, treat their running backs almost like they treat their quarterbacks at this point with kid gloves, especially if you're coming off an injury. I don't think CEH injury was ever that serious. They said it was in a high ankle sprain, but they're just going to be cautious. They're going to make sure that, there's no need to put him out there and in practice or in a preseason game because it means nothing. Just make sure he's as healthy as possible for week 1. I think that Andy Reid knows what he's doing. He's been around the block for a long time. He's a veteran. Barkley, same thing. I think Barkley is a freak athlete. If you look at him. So I think that they knew that he knew he was going to play all along week 1. I think they just wanted to ease him along, not rush things, make sure that all their I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But I think from day 1, I thought Barkley was going to play week 1.
Yeah.
So they also gotten very better with the ACL surgery. So
yeah, there's a lot of players that are coming back faster from the ACLs. I'll tell you, I have both players, and I am going to start both of them. But I did pick up Devontae Booker just in case on my bench for Barkley. I'm not as worried about CEH, but I did pick up Darrell Williams and I dropped him. But I think CEH is going to play. I'm not as worried about the high ankle sprain as some other people are because it was 3 weeks ago. He rested. It's not like they're trying to rush him out there. Even if he is on a pitch count, I still want to start him being in that Kansas City offense. But Barkley, I am a little concerned about. I think he's going to be on a pitch count. I'm not trusting him to win me my weeks, but I think that's going to happen later on in the season. But just in case we get to Sunday and they say he's not ready to go, I have Devontae Booker on my bench, to kind of keep my team afloat for a couple of weeks just in case. So I am a little concerned about Barkley, but not as concerned about CEH.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think Booker is like a direct replacement for Barkley. I don't think he's, I don't think it's similar to Mike Davis' situation last year with Carolina where CMC's not playing. Mike Davis is going to still put up 20 points. I don't think he's that comparable where, Saquon would have put up 25 and now he's going to put up 20. Booker's going to put up 20. I think it's more like he might crack double digits for you.
But I'll tell you, I think in leagues where you may be thin on running back, I want to have Booker on my bench if I have Barkley because I don't know if I have a replacement that's going to get that workload, for that week. So I want to put Booker in to get the workload that I think Barkley is going to get. He may not be Barkley. Of course, he's not going to put up the points or have the impact that Barkley's going to have. But he could be one of those players that could win you your week, in spite of maybe not having Barkley. So I want to have that replacement to put in my lineup just in case, because I know Barkley may not be 100% healthy just yet. So they're going to gradually kind of increase his workload as we go through the season. And let's not forget, it's a 17-game season for each team. So it's a grueling pace, especially on running backs. So teams are going to be using multiple running backs. So, for a running back like Barkley, and they want to keep him healthy, they want to make sure he gets through the season, I don't think you're going to see that workload. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get to Sunday and they say he's not suiting up on Sunday. I wouldn't be surprised.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. So.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. So I want to have that handcuff, ready to go just in case.
Yeah.
Anything else you got on this?
No, I think you really pretty much covered that part.
Okay. The next topic, and this is a big one. So we had developments today in this. We found out that Le'Veon Bell and Devontae Freeman were working out for the Baltimore Ravens yesterday. Looks like Le'Veon won the job. He's being added to the practice squad. What do you do if?
What do I do with? You cut out a little bit.
What do you do with Le'Veon Bell? If he's on your waiver wire, what do you do?
It depends on how deep your bench is. If you have a 5 or 6 man bench, I wouldn't say drop anyone that you drafted for him. But if you have an extended, bench where it's 7, 8 players, maybe you might take a flyer on Le'Veon. He's going to be on practice squad this week probably, so he's not going to play week 1. So you're not going to be able to see anything from him. So I personally wouldn't pick him up. I'm more interested in Latavius Murray just getting cut. He had a career year last season. I had his best average per rush last year, and he's got cut. There's teams that's looking for him. I thought he might end up in Baltimore right before the news broke that Le'Veon got signed. But
you got Gus Edwards and Le'Veon Bell, and they do basically the same thing. That's the only difference. I think. I'm sorry, Gus Edwards and Latavius Murray.
Lab Murray.
Yeah. Le'Veon Bell adds a completely different dynamic to that
You don't think he's washed
game.
up?
I don't think so. I don't think he's washed up. I just think he wasn't in the right situation with Kansas City, and
or the Jets.
Well, yeah, or with the Jets. But he was actually, when healthy, he was fairly productive with the Jets when he was on the field. But he was terrible with Kansas City because he came in just like he is coming in now. And
behind Abel.
Yeah, and I don't know if they knew how to use him. I think Harbaugh and the Ravens are going to know how to use Le'Veon Bell. He's going to be in that scat back type of role. He's going to be the third down back that's going to come in. I think he's a valuable add if you need a running back on your bench for later in the season. Because I don't think that they have anybody that can add that dynamic to their running game. Gus Edwards isn't that guy. We don't know what we're getting with Tyson Williams. What do you have to lose with picking up Le'Veon Bell as in a PPR league? I don't think
like I said, in a shorter bench league, I don't see myself or people should drop players that they drafted over him. Not before the season starts. You don't know what your bench guys are going to do. But going back to Le'Veon, I think he's a great running back. He has great patience. And in that zone blocking scheme was perfect for him. Waiting on the holes to open up was perfect. Not every team had an offensive line like the Steelers at that time, or plays that same scheme. So I think that's the hard. I think he's kind of I don't want to dismiss Le'Veon Bell's career, but I think he was a system back, and he was perfect for that system. He was able to do that with the Jets, and plus he's getting older. He had a lot of wear and tear from Pittsburgh. Missed the year, 2 years with the Jets. Did nothing last year. Sometimes these running backs fall off a cliff.
Yeah. See, what I think is if there was a situation he was going to go to, he landed in the perfect situation. Because one thing we know about Baltimore is going to run the ball. And I think they're going to have enough touches to go around for him and Gus Edwards and possibly Tyson Williams to be involved in the running game. And then Le'Veon Bell, I think, is going to be involved in the passing game. And what is Baltimore missing? They're without Rashad Bateman. They got Sammy Watkins coming in. Marquise
Hollywood,
Brown,
Hollywood,
yeah,
though.
Hollywood Brown, but I think they're going to start using those running backs in the passing game. That's what they had J.K. Dobbins for. That's what he was going to be used for.
So we didn't discuss this before. Well, what do you think happens to Tyson Williams? What does this say about Tyson? The fact that they keep looking at other running backs to bring in, as opposed to handing him over the second RB job.
I don't care what John Harbaugh says in the media. I don't think there's enough trust in Tyson Williams for him to come in and be that second back that they can depend on. I think they needed a vet that they could trust, that could come in, handle the workload. I think Tyson Williams is going to be that spell back that you'll see come in occasionally to give Gus Edwards, some leave, some rest. But I think Le'Veon Bell is going to come in and be that third down pass catching back and the guy that's going to come in and be impactful in the run game behind Gus Edwards. If I need a spot on my bench, like I had a handcuff, I had Darrell Williams where I had CEH. I dropped Darrell Williams and went and got Le'Veon Bell because I think later in the season, Le'Veon Bell is going to be impactful for the Baltimore Ravens. We all expect the Baltimore Ravens to be.
I see.
Yeah, I mean, we all expect the Baltimore Ravens to be in the playoffs. So they're going to be up in games. They're going to be running the ball. I think they're going to be using all three backs. It was the best place for him to go. Now you did touch on something that I wanted to talk about as well, with being released from the Saints. What is this impact?
This is big news for Jones Jr. This is great news for him. I think everybody should run and get him right away if he's available in one of your leagues. That is someone that you would cut one of your late round draft picks to pick up. I think
we're talking about Tony Jones Jr.
Tony Jones Jr. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's Marvin Jones. There's a couple of Jones, but Tony Jones Jr. Pick him up. I think this shows a lot of faith in him. I think this is a step in the right direction. That means they have faith in him. If anything happens to Kamara, Tony's going to be the guy. Pick him up as a backup, a handcuff, something like he might. And Lat Murray last year had a little standalone value as well. So now with Tony Jones, he might be able to, on the bye weeks or in your flex position, you might be able to start Tony Jones. But Lat Murray, the question I have for you is, where does he go? Like, who needs a running back, and where could he be most fantasy relevant without hurting someone that got drafted early on?
I'll tell you the most sensible place that I think he goes, and that is to Chicago, behind David Montgomery, because I think he offers something that Chicago doesn't have right now. Like, they have Montgomery.
I love Montgomery, though.
Montgomery's going to be involved in the pass game. Montgomery's going to be involved in the run game. The only true running back you have behind Montgomery is Damian Williams. Damian Williams is not that great of an effective runner between the tackles. He's good in the passing game, but I think if there's some place for Lat Murray to go, I think it's Chicago, because he can be that, move the chains type of back. He can give David Montgomery the spell that he needs to get some rest on the bench.
But that muddies the Chicago running back situation. We're talking about fantasy wise. As a help for the team, Chicago Bears team, that might be a great move. But for fantasy, we don't want to see that.
No, we don't want to see that for fantasy.
Montgomery want him as a 3-down back. They don't want no competition. They're not scared of Williams behind him. You do not want Lat Murray going to Chicago.
But coaches do not care about your fantasy team.
No, not just my fantasy team. I only own him 1 out of 8 leagues. But I'm just saying overall, this is fantasy talk. Nobody wants him to take over, go to Chicago and take over, possibly eat into Montgomery's role.
I don't have any shares. I don't have any shares of David Montgomery, so I don't care.
You want that backfield muddle.
So where do you think Lat Murray goes?
I asked you the question because I really can't. The obvious choices where what we talked about earlier, like Houston, they don't really have anyone, cemented in that spot. But other than that, I feel like anywhere he goes is going to muddy the situation, because as a fantasy owner, you're going to say, "Oh, this team just signed Lat Murray. That means they don't have faith in their number one running back." It's going to muddy the situation no matter what. So whether it's trade value for trying to offload that guy that had the number one spot or not, it's always going to be a situation where it's not going to be clear cut. And
Now,
for fantasy purposes, everybody should be nervous where he lands.
you went and picked up Lat Murray when he got released, right?
Yeah, I picked him up.
So you think he's going to be fantasy relevant somewhere?
Yes, but
Okay.
I'm scared that if he lands on the team that has a star running back or a David Montgomery, for example, Miles Sanders, for example, someone in the third, fourth, fifth round that was going drafted, somewhere like that where the team has faith, but that faith can be, they could cheat on that running back real quickly. If they see a nice shiny new toy, they might go after that's out there for cheap. They might go cheat on him and bring someone else in.
Yeah, I see Hill in the comments. He said, "Wow, Hill, where do you think he's going to go? Tell us in the comments." But while we wait that reply, let's go to the next topic, and let's talk streamers.
Yep.
So who are your week one streamers for this week? Who are you looking at? And these are people that we were talking about that are outside of the top 36?
36 wide receivers, top 24 running backs. Some guys I like outside of the top 36. I don't really own many of them in my fantasy, but I wish I did. I missed out on all of them in my leagues, and I'm kind of disappointed. Corey Davis of the Jets, number one receiver on the Jets. Zach Wilson looks really, really good. He looked Corey Davis looked really good in the preseason. I'm excited and want to see what he's going to do with the Jets. He was coming. He developed really slow on the Titans. So, but he looks like he got his feet under him last year. He got used to the NFL game. I like him. Another player, Marvin Jones. Everywhere he goes, he performs. People always sleep on him. He's kind of like Tyler Boyd. Everyone always sleeps on him, but he always performs. He's outside the top 36. Another guy, Marquez Callaway, the number one guy on the Saints. Amazing.
He should be in the top 36, honestly.
But right now, if you go off of what the quote unquote experts have as ranking for his top 36 for this week, he's falling way out of it. He's in like 45.
We're not paying attention. He should be in the top 36.
I agree, but from the list that I was going off of, that he got to be in your lineup. I think even if you only start 2 or 3 receivers, make sure he's in the top. He's a top 36 for me this week, but overall consensus, he's outside of that. And a guy that people are sleeping on, Michael Pittman as a wide receiver. I think without Ty, it makes it even more imperative to get him into your lineup. I still kind of believe in Carson Wentz. I don't think he's as bad as people are making him out to be. People are very quick to write him off and write off a lot of players really quickly after a down year. I think this gives him a fresh start. He's reunited with Frank Wright, so I think is a good place for him. So those are my receivers.
I think Michael Pittman should be in the top 36 too. I don't know why he's outside of the top 36. He's a number one receiver.
There's a lot of good receivers out there. There's a lot of good receivers out there, Scrap. So just hearing the names, off the top of the head, you say this player is a top 36 player. But if you look at the list of people ahead of them, a lot of them deserve to be in the top 36.
Yeah.
What about your running backs? Do you have any running backs for the flex?
So we just talked about one, and that's Tony Jones. I think it's solidified. Week one, I think it's solidified. Like,
wow.
The release of Latavius Murray, we know how productive Latavius Murray was in that backup role. And from what we saw in the preseason from Tony Jones Jr., I think that just solidifies him as kind of like a sleeper if you need somebody to put in your lineup, because he's going to get work. He's going to get touches. I had a couple of wide receivers, one being Russell Gage. I think Russell Gage is a sleeper for this week. He's going against a weak Philadelphia defense. I don't think he's going to be matched up against Slay. I think Calvin Ridley's going to be matched up against Slay. So you can see Matt Ryan go to Russell Gage a lot in that game.
I love Russell Gage. That's a great call. And Russell Gage, people didn't realize Russell Gage had 70 catches last year, and he played very well because Julio was out for so long, for like 7-8 games last year. He played very well in those games. Now Julio's gone for good. he's very underrated.
Yeah.
That's a very good pick.
The other one is Terrace Marshall Jr. I think he's going to get some targets. I think he's a good flex play if you need a flex play to stream this week. I think he has a connection with Sam Darnold from what we've seen in the preseason, and I think he's going to get some targets playing in the slot. Also, if you need a running back, and I don't know how this guy is a sleeper, but Damian Harris. I think Damian Harris needs to be in your lineup. I don't think he's getting enough credit. I know people are kind of like down on him because he doesn't get involved in the passing game.
Yeah.
But I think if we think New England is going to be up in this game, and that's kind of what the consensus is right now, and you know that New England likes to run the ball, they're going to be protecting their rookie quarterback. You put Damian Harris in. Damian Harris is going to get, I believe, 20-plus touches this game. So
one running back I got for you is something I wanted – you kind of touched on earlier, Leonard Fournette. I think he's a great flex play right now. Some may say he's in the top 24, but he's a great flex play. I think he's a great flex play because of, like you said, Tampa might be up big, or they might have a lead. Then they're going to just pound the rock. Fournette had a great end of the season during the stretch run to the championship, to the Super Bowl. He was the number one guy. He was the main guy over Rojo. I own both of them in different leagues. So I think that Fournette is going to end up having the better season. Fournette has proven that he could catch the ball, he could run the ball. I think, and I think Brady trusts him most.
I need a couple of weeks to fill out that Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones situation because
even for flex this week.
Yeah, because here's the thing: Ronald Jones always gets hot at some point, and he gets the carries, and then he fumbles, and then he's out of the game. So I don't know when that's coming, but I don't know if this is going to be the Ronald Jones game or not. So I need a couple weeks to fill out that situation before Leonard Fournette goes into my lineup.
Quick question: now, who gets the first carry on that team?
I think Fournette gets the first carry. Okay. But I think Ronald Jones comes in, and Ronald Jones is the more dynamic running back. And if he gets hot, we've seen them continuously feed him the ball until he fumbles. And then he's on the bench for like 2 consecutive games.
So, if you had to start one of those two this week, I know you don't want either one. You want to figure it out. Which one you going with?
I'm going Ronald Jones first.
Okay.
I'm going Ronald Jones first just because I know what he can do. That's the only thing. Leonard Fournette is more of a plotter. Yes, he can be involved in the passing game, but he's not that back that like I'm excited to put in my lineup. Ronald Jones, if I had to take one of the two to start the season, I'm taking Ronald Jones first.
Ronald Jones. All right, we're gonna talk about this next week.
I don't like either one. I'm not.
You making sure you get that clear. You making sure.
I'll tell you, on my team, I have Jamal Williams and I have Leonard Fournette. I am more sold on starting Jamal Williams this week just because of the injury to DeAndre Swift than I am Leonard Fournette. And
I like Swift.
I like Swift. I like Swift too, but is Swift going to be healthy enough?
So from what it seemed like, if I'm reading through the tea leaves, the coach was just, the coach saying that his conditioning, wasn't there because he was out early in preseason, in training camp. I don't think that's much of an issue because it's been 2 weeks. His conditioning should be up. I think it was just a way to, snap the young guy into shape, make sure that he's on his P's and Q's and then not take anything for granted. But I don't think he's going to be limited in any way. He's been back at practice. They were talking about conditioning was the issue, and he's not Jerome Bettis. Conditioning shouldn't be an issue.
If I had to take one of the two, Jamal Williams or Leonard Fournette, I'm taking Jamal Williams this week. That's just my pick. Just my pick. I can't trust Leonard Fournette right now.
You don't like Leonard Fournette.
There will come a point in the season where I will trust Leonard Fournette. I can't trust him right now. just not right now.
Man, poor Leonard.
So those are our streamers for this week. If you have any questions, make sure you hit up the 3-Man Weave YouTube page. You can hit up the Facebook page. We'll answer all of your questions. You got anything else to discuss today, bud?
No, I'm just excited as week one. Week one is finally here.
Week one is here.
Season's over. It's all about now. Everything that you put into the preseason or in the off season, all the work you put in. This is when it pays off. So it's going to be exciting. Week 1 is always exciting. It's usually a lot of high-scoring games because the defenses tend not to be up to speed to the level that the offenses are. So this is going to be exciting. It's usually one of the highest-scoring weeks of the fantasy year is week 1. So points for everybody this week.
Agreed. Yeah, points for everybody, hopefully. All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for us. And, there's no crying in fantasy. We just want to give a shout out to the 3-Man Weave podcast for having us on again. Also, we'll have an update for you on the best of the best
The
league
drama
and what's going on. Make sure you check out at BOTB Fantasy League and see what's going on in that league. We'll have an update for you next week. And shout out to the 3-Man Weave Fantasy Football League as well. We'll see you next week. Appreciate you, bud.
Thank you, bro.
All right.
See ya.